India has marked a historic milestone by signing a $14 billion agreement with Burkina Faso to import high-quality maize and sorghum. This alliance, spearheaded by President Ibrahim Traoré, not only fortifies food security, but also paves the way for fresh market opportunities for both countries. Beyond commerce, India has committed to transfer advanced agricultural technology and providing training, laying the groundwork for sustainable progress and shared prosperity among their populations. The announcement arrived just after sunrise, catching global commodity markets off guard as they emerged from their nightly slumber. In a matter of moments, a single breaking headline electrified trading floors from Mumbai all the way to New York. Burkina Faso had entered into a $14 billion maize and sorghum export pact with India. Within minutes, grain futures soared. Agricultural experts appeared on live broadcasts, scrambling to make sense of the development, while competitors from South America to Eastern Europe urgently contacted their trade officials. For many, the agreement seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Yet, as we are about to reveal, this was far from an impulsive arrangement. Instead, it was the culmination of a meticulously planned strategy, years in the making. To truly understand how a landlocked West African nation managed to clinch one of the largest grain agreements in modern times, we must revisit the understated origins of this unlikely alliance. The initial press statement was concise, just 3 paragraphs devoid of pomp and empty slogans. It listed only the essentials: figures, timelines, and signatures. The deal covered 20 million metric tons of maize and sorghum to be delivered over the coming 10 years. The buyer, the Republic of India. The price tag, $14 billion. To most observers, Burkina Faso is a country more readily linked with gold mining and cotton production than with major grain exports. Yet suddenly, the nation was featured on the front pages of every significant economic journal, overtaking established agricultural titans in one bold stroke. Questions surfaced rapidly. Why would India, a nation that already produces hundreds of millions of tons of grain, look thousands of miles west for additional supply? And how could Burkina Faso, with a far smaller population and less farmland, fulfill such a massive commitment? These queries were left unaddressed in the press release, but answers began to emerge during weeks of discreet background briefings. As the narrative unfolded, a new understanding emerged. This deal was not merely about grain, but also about politics, logistics, and the shifting tides of the global economy. To unravel the why, we must trace the story back to the first private discussions between these two nations. The roots of the agreement stretch back to a series of quiet trade missions over the past 3 years. While the world's attention was fixed on splashy deals made by larger economies, Burkina Faso's leaders were subtly navigating international summits, presenting their agricultural strengths to a select circle of buyers. India was a logical choice. With a swiftly expanding population, evolving climate conditions, and increasing anxieties about food security, Indian policymakers had already set out to diversify their sources of grain. They sought suppliers capable of delivering steady quantities, unhindered by the price swings that come from over-dependence on any single region. Informal negotiations began with a chance meeting at a regional food security conference, followed by discreet visits from Indian trade representatives to the fertile central plains of Burkina Faso. The earliest conversations were not about dazzling investment sums, but focused on production capacity, quality assurance, and lasting reliability. As confidence grew on both sides, so did the ambitions. By the end of the second year, the dialogue had advanced well beyond initial exploratory exchanges. Indian economic analysts ran models indicating that even a moderate influx of African grain could stabilize domestic prices and serve as a safeguard against poor harvests at home. However, one major hurdle remained: transport. Burkina Faso, lacking access to the sea, faced a monumental challenge in transporting countless tons of grain to India. Orchestrating the movement required intricate coordination, spanning from bustling ports to sprawling railways and vital shipping routes. The real progress emerged when both governments decided to jointly invest in upgrading essential infrastructure. transforming outdated railroads and building larger storage depots in a nearby coastal nation. With these logistical barriers dismantled, the framework for a $14 billion pact quickly solidified. Yet India's interest extended beyond mere logistics. At the heart of this deal was strategy. India's grain landscape is filled with contradictions. Official figures suggest bountiful harvests of maize, sorghum, and wheat, yet the equilibrium between consumption and output is precarious. In seasons of exceptional yields, excess grain languishes and spoils in overstretched warehouses. In dry years, when monsoon rains falter, imports surge, triggering soaring prices and political difficulties for the government. Burkina Faso presented India with a unique advantage: climate diversity. Indian crops are at the mercy of unpredictable monsoons, but Burkina Faso's grain regions rely on a different rainfall cycle. This means that a poor harvest in India does not always coincide with setbacks in West Africa. Global rivalry also loomed large. Countries such as China and a host of Middle Eastern states had already begun locking in African grain supplies through aggressive multi-decade contracts. India could not afford to remain passive while other nations secured their food futures. By clinching a 10-year agreement, Indian leaders were shielding part of their food chain from uncertainty. Sorghum, after all, is a staple for both people and livestock, making this deal a crucial safety net for the nation's burgeoning dairy and poultry sectors. However, outsiders still wondered, why choose Burkina Faso over a larger, established grain powerhouse? The answer lay in the nuances of diplomacy. Burkina Faso was not short of suitors. In recent years, global demand for African crops had soared, drawing buyers from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe into fierce competition. But India's proposition stood apart. Firstly, India was prepared to compensate not only in cash, but also through substantial infrastructure investment, modernizing silos, funding advanced irrigation, and providing expertise to boost crop yields. This meant that even as grain shipments departed Burkina Faso, the country's agricultural foundations were receiving a vital upgrade. Secondly, India's approach carried less political baggage. Unlike certain major players who tied trade deals to security commitments or political alliances, India framed its offer as a true partnership. There was also a foundation of trust. Though not widely publicized, a series of smaller agreements in textiles, pharmaceuticals, and machinery over the past 10 years had strengthened ties between Burkina Faso and Indian firms. For Burkina Faso, the $14 billion deal was more than a simple sale. It was a bold step toward establishing itself as a dependable agricultural leader in a shifting global marketplace. The ripple effects were immediate. In West Africa, neighboring countries recognized new possibilities. If Burkina Faso could broker such a deal, it proved that large-scale grain exports from the region were both feasible and lucrative. Others began racing to bolster their own export potential, hoping to capture similar opportunities. Meanwhile, in places like South America and Eastern Europe, reactions were more cautious. Some viewed Burkina Faso's emergence as stiff competition for Asian markets. Economic experts even forecasted market corrections as these nations strove to retain their foothold. International organizations dedicated to global food security applauded the broadening of supply channels, emphasizing that distributing agricultural output across various climate regions lessens the danger of widespread shortages occurring at the same time. Yet, beneath this wave of optimism, a crucial question lingered. Was Burkina Faso truly capable of maintaining such significant export volumes without jeopardizing its own food reserves? This dilemma brings us to the heart of the matter: the delicate balance between pursuing export ambitions and safeguarding domestic food stability. For Burkina Faso, the task was unmistakable: how to honor an enormous export agreement while ensuring that its own people do not face scarcity. The government's response came in two main strategies. To begin with, it committed to earmark a set portion of the country's total grain harvest for local consumption, no matter what export deals were in place. Alongside this, authorities promised to channel a share of the DLS proceeds into subsidizing food costs for citizens and upgrading irrigation systems, all aimed at increasing overall crop yields. Despite these assurances, some critics remained unconvinced. They cautioned that the unpredictable tides of global demand could drive exporters to redirect grain away from home markets, even with safeguards in place, especially if international prices soared. Here is where India's infrastructure investments took on immense importance. By financing advanced storage depots and providing training for farmers, the objective was to raise harvests sufficiently to meet both internal and external needs. Whether these aspirations will be fulfilled remains a question only the future can resolve. However, one fact is undeniable. This agreement has transformed Burkina Faso's global image as an agricultural powerhouse. What began as quiet negotiations in trade conference rooms soon became breaking news that reverberated through international commodity exchanges. The $14 billion maize and sorghum pact between Burkina Faso and India represents far more than a routine trade arrangement. It stands as a testament to a changing world, one where rising nations chart their own futures, where food security is shaped as much by diplomatic maneuvering as by cultivation, and where physical geography no longer sets the limits of potential. For Burkina Faso, this is a courageous proclamation that it will no longer be defined only by gold and cotton, but will stake its claim as a leading force in the world's grain markets. For India, it marks a deliberate effort to secure its prospects in an era of climate uncertainty. And for the wider globe, it is a powerful reminder. In an age of interconnected economies, an agreement signed in a remote, landlocked West African nation can send ripples across continents and touch the daily lives of billions.